Okay, the third video now that we've gone through and we've talked about the idea that we really aren't in a democracy as much as we are a republic. So put the two together, and that's kind of what we really come up with is what's called a democratic republic, and that is the correct term for actually what the United States is. Although again, we're going to get into more about those different types of what they classify as American democracies or democratic republics. The theory argument there, we'll get more into that tomorrow. But what are the concepts of a democratic republic? Well, basically, the first concept is that it drives at the idea that you have the fundamental worth of an individual. Okay, that is the key component of a democratic republic in the United States. One of the things that we look at here in the United States is this concept, of rights, and you hear a lot of people talk about this. Well, I have the freedom to do this. I have the right to do that. Over the break, we had that big thing with Robertson, the guy off of the video, the TV show series there, Duck Dynasty, and he gave an interview, and some of the things he said was very explicit, and in some cases very graphic in his viewpoints, and you hear a lot of people when he got. I guess temporarily fired because he is back, but suspended, I guess, is what happened to him. But you hear people screaming and yelling. There's a big deal about this, that, he had his right to say what he had to say and stuff like that. Well, that gets to this concept of individual worth. But the other key thing here you have to remember, and this is something that people don't realize, is that the welfare of the one or few is subordinate to the interest of the many. So even though the one or few may come out and say, hey, I have the right to say what I want to say, if what you say, if what you do goes against or can harm or hurt or somehow it discriminates against the interest of the many, then what your viewpoint is not always 100% you're right. And that's a big thing about the concept of democracy, is that you don't always have the right to say and do what you want to say and do. Although you hear people say that all the time, that they believe they have that right. And it's not true. Some of the things that you can be forced to do that you don't want to is to pay taxes, to obey law, to go to school. Those things you may not want to do, but the government has the right to enforce that upon you under a democratic republic that we have selected and created in this society. The concept of popular sovereignty, the will of the people, not of the one, is very important, and that is a key thing that you really got to put down into your mind. Is the idea that yes, you have individual freedoms, yes, you have individual rights, but your rights are limited. If you don't like that, then move. Find a different country. Go find an island where you can be the king and the sovereign of it. But in our society, in a democratic republic, yes, you do have individual rights. Yes, you do have individual freedoms, but they are limited. The second key concept of a democratic republic is respect for the equality of all persons. Now, here again, it gets into a lot of arguments here. The Declaration of Independence claims and screams that all men are created equal, and that is absolutely true from that concept. But it comes into the idea that all are born the same or equal, but not all are entitled to the equality of a life. And this gets into the argument again between Democrats and Republicans, whereas the Republicans scream and yell that that's what the Democrats want to do, is they want this idea of complete socialism. They want everybody to have the same. Everybody makes exactly the same amount of money. Everybody works the same. And that is it is a government philosophy of someone who is a socialist, okay, someone who is a Marxist. That is not the idea of someone that is a Democrat. Democrats don't argue for that at all. They argue for the equality of opportunity, the equality of law, that you should not somehow, because of your entity of wealth or name status or recognition, have somehow an unfair advantage over someone else in terms of the law or opportunity to have the same things in life. Okay, not that you are given the same things in life, but you have the chance for that. That's what a concept of a democratic republic is all about. That means that racism, sexism, ageism should not exist in this type of society. But again, if you look at the United States, it does. Very rampantly, it does. And so we are not there as a democratic republic to where we need to be. The third key concept of a democratic republic is majority rule, minority right. Okay, and again, this it sounds very easy. It looks very easy that you can understand it, but really it's not. A key here again is the fact that even though in our society we do go by what the majority rule says, it doesn't mean that the majority is always right. Many times, what the majority views as what they want is not necessarily the best choice. That's why there's such importance to have a minority's right. The minority, and again, we're not talking about color, we're not talking about race, we're not talking about gender, we're talking about ideas. And the concept here again is the fact that in our society, when it comes to a concept of, okay, should we do gun control or should we not do gun control? Should we eliminate handguns or not eliminate handguns? Should we get rid of 30 round clips or not? Okay, that debate there, let's just take that issue there. Okay, if the majority came out and said, yes, we want that, or no, we don't want that, okay, that doesn't mean that they're right or wrong. It means that that's the direction that the society's probably going to try to lean towards to go. Doesn't mean we will, because again, that gets into our idea about that elitism, pluralism, and majoritism of a democracy. But generally, that's the direction that most of our political leaders will tend to go, is towards that essence of a majority rule. However, many times we also go towards what the group that does not have the majority screaming and yelling goes with. And sometimes that's because we'll look back and say, wait a minute, the minority who was arguing in this case for X instead of with Y, they may be right. And so that's why in a society like ours, we allow for this open free speech to allow both sides to make their arguments, because we don't know necessarily who's right and wrong when it comes to some of these issues. But you have to pick a choice. You have to make a decision as a society which way you're going to go. And so you need to be able to make that move. And traditionally, our society moves with the majority. And then we look back when we make a mistake as a society and decide maybe we needed to curve back and take what the minority was saying. Okay, and again, that's just kind of what I was summing up there with minority-majority rights. The search for satisfaction, left unchecked, the majority party will tend to destroy its opposition. That is why you do not have in a democratic republic. You do not just say, okay, the majority, we're going to go with what they say. The rest of you guys, we don't care what you say. You can't have that, even though we try to do that in our society as well. We try to crush the minority's opposition and not allow them to have anything to say. And what tends to happen there many times then is you tend to ruin and you tend to destroy a democracy. And that is one of the biggest downfalls in the United States, is the fact that we do have a society where we do try to crush that opposition, the minority groups, and we do not allow them to have their say then. Okay, the fourth concept then, number 4, is necessitative compromise. Here again, we could get into all kinds of discussions about how this is not happening, and we'll probably talk more about this in class. But the fact of the matter is, we just aren't a very compromising society anymore. It's my way or the highway type of society, where you got the Tea Party that screams and yells and throws temper tantrums like little babies, that if they don't get their way, they won't do anything. They'll hold their breath until they pass out. That's where we're heading in our society. And you can see, we back in 2013, we had the lowest productivity Congress in our nation's history, and we didn't get nothing done. You have to have that compromise. You have to have that ability for both sides to blend, to adjust their competing views in order to get things done. A democracy puts the individual first, insisting that individuals equal above all others. In our society, we don't tend to do that so much, but you have to have that concept. The fifth concept is individual liberty and freedom. Okay, and we've talked a lot about this already. The idea that yes, you do have individual freedoms, yes, you do have individual rights. You do not have complete freedom, because that would equal anarchy, not democracy then. Oliver Wendell Holmes, I guess, summed it up best when he said that the right of an individual is to swing their fist until the end of their fist reaches the other person's nose. That's where your rights end. You cannot inflict your rights on somebody else who does not want to listen to it or have it. And so you have to have that limitation then. The individual versus the freedom of society, that's a huge one. You know, we can get into all kinds again about the FSA and whether or not they should be able to spy and listen in on our phone conversations and our computer internet things. And that's very good discussion, great debate. But when it comes down to the end, when it comes down to national security versus individual freedom, where do we rule on a society? There's no necessarily right or wrong answer on that. It really does get into all kinds of debate then. Okay, the last concept is capitalism, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that one in class rather than dealing with it here. But basically, capitalism, the idea that is dealing with profit and competition and business control, and we'll get a little bit more into that later then. Okay, we're going to get into the next unit, I'm sorry, the next slide of our show. Segment here on citizenship, and so I'm going to finish up with this video presentation, and then we're going to get to your last video presentation to finish up the unit.